the current state, there we go, current state of the wool industry in Gwnaed with Jennifer Hunter in 2019. So that's kind of where the project Made with Wool started, Gwnaed Gwlan. So over to you, Geraint.
Diolch o galon, diolch Ellen, and welcome all to the session. It's great to see you. I can't see all of the faces, unfortunately, but when we come to the discussions and questions towards the third or fourth quarter of the hour, then I might ask you to switch the videos on because it's nice to see faces, although we are in this digital world. But for most of the next half an hour, I'll be sharing slides. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, as Ellen mentioned, I, along with my colleagues in Lafan, were commissioned to do a piece of work under the scoping study budget for the Made with Wool project, looking in particular around the supply chain challenges around wool. Now, I will start to share my slides, and before I do sort of disappear to the corner of the screen, yesterday I was dropping out for a few seconds. So if I drop out for a few seconds, I don't think I should lose you, but do come in any of the Made with Wool project to say, Geraint, you need to rewind a minute or two or whatever. Okay, right, let's just share the slides. Iawn. Da chi'n gweld hwnna? Dwi'n gweld Sioned. Diolch Elen. Can I just need a screen of void? So yes, I'm here representing Lafan Consulting Group. I'm very lucky to run a business. There's 7 of us working in Lafan. And for those of you living near Bangor, you will recognize Lafan is the beach just outside Bangor, well known for its mussel production. So if I open my blind behind me, I could see Lafan Beach. So I can see the beach behind me and the Carneddau Mountains in front. So very lucky to live and work where I am. And that's my email address there. So on the chat, please feel free to introduce yourself. I will not pause for introductions because that could take a few minutes, but let's use the tech for our advantage. Please put your name on the chat. Please explain if you're representing a business or an organization, and share with us why have you allocated an hour for coming along this afternoon. So by all means, network on the chat. You can send a message for all of us or directly to someone you've seen. So we might as well use the technology and network whilst I go through my slides. So please post on the chat a short introduction about yourself. I'll do the same for my business. So Lafan is based virtually at Emspark in Gyflenwi, and those are the contact details. And to learn a bit more about what we do, by all means, go to the website lafan.cymru. There's 6 of us, and we're up to 7, and we are currently recruiting to grow the team. And we're lucky to be working in a range of areas linked by our desire to support and develop the rural economy. We support groups, we facilitate, we get commissioned to look at challenges or issues involved in rural sectors, those including farming, of course, food, tourism, and increasingly community enterprises. And our expertise in-house includes supply chains, agri-food, and education. So there's a very quick flavor of Lafan. And as Ellen mentioned, I've been lucky to be involved in this progress with wool, trying to tackle the main issue of adding value to wool, going back to 2018, 2019, where I worked with Jennifer Hunter on a feasibility study to look at what could be done to respond to this major challenge of adding value to what we all feel, I'm sure, is an amazing fibre. And from one thing to another, we worked and we talked with a lot of people, such as yourselves here today, and led to the Made with Wool project bid. And we've had a wonderful team delivering that in Sioned, Angharad, and Ellen. So I should also put a disclaimer, I'm not a wool expert, but I've been fascinated by what I've learned along the journey with wool and been glad to contribute. Before I finish the preamble, I will draw your attention to another business I'm involved in, my own business, which is Madryn. And this reason I flag this up, which I don't usually do, but I will do this time, is because the experience we've got from the food side and with the business and working with a number of food producers did influence the conclusions and the content of the report on the world supply chain. So what Matrin does is manage a number of supply chains. We work with 11 factories manufacturing, and we bring products into the marketplace, such as Jones Crisps and Calolan condiments and chutneys. So that business is very much reliant on some understanding of supply chains, and a lot of the skills and experience in those tasks is transferable to other products such as wool. So for the next 25 minutes, 30 minutes, here is what I would like to cover. I will just confirm the brief we had from the project. We will look at the supply chain for wool. I will flag up the directory that the project has up and running now, a directory of various companies across the UK involved in various elements of wool processing. I will touch on common challenges when it comes to outsourcing and developing the supply chain. We'll focus on outsourcing itself, and then I will share a few thoughts on how you might go ahead to build your supply chain. I'm conscious that some of you are already developing or running your own supply chain. So some areas of the slides you might find very basic, and others might find very useful. So I have tried to cater to quite a wide audience, but I will make the assumption that we are all familiar with the term supply chain. Now, when this work was commissioned, we had over a number of months, or maybe even a year or two, had started to draw parallels between the food industry and wool. And what I noticed, and some of my colleagues within the project, was that when it comes to red meat or dairy in particular, there are numerous examples across Wales of farmers who have gone ahead to add value to their own product, either directly or by collaboration and joint ventures. I've just put a few selective brands up there just to illustrate the point that adding value to basic commodity or a product of Welsh farms already is quite vibrant in the food sector. However, that is not the case when it comes to wool. And it has sort of generated a few useful discussions on why that is the case. And you could explain partly due to how the supply chain is developed in terms of wool, and the expectation of the years for the wool to be going into the British wool and other avenues, and maybe farmers haven't been as aware of the opportunities to add value to their own wool. However, there is the option to add value to your own wool exist, and it is a message we're keen to highlight, that there is an option for farmers, and there are examples already happening, but in relatively short or low numbers. One of them is the wool shed in Tywyn in Meirionnydd. Gillian Williams, along with her husband John, they add value to their own wool. There are other examples, but I'm just flagging an example to make a point that there are now small businesses popping up that add value to their own wool. So we were keen to sort of further explore into this, and what we realized is there is a big challenge just to understand the supply chain. So part of the brief was to look at creating a flowchart which sort of tried to capture what are the different supply chains that can be developed using wool as the core primary product. Now on the screen there is the flowchart. And one of the things we were trying to do is to create a flowchart that could fit into one page. And I was speaking with Ellen, Sioned and Angahara just before coming on air. And they were explaining to me that this has been circulated already on the social platforms and has had a very warm response. And people have found this very useful because even people within the wool sector might not be familiar with all the different parts of the supply chain. I will not go into detail on this because the slides will be available for you, and of course the flowchart. I will sort of flag up a couple of things. When we did put this flowchart together, we were reliant on getting information from various sources, and we've been very lucky for people to be kind to share their opinions. This is, I wouldn't say this is 100% perfect because there are slightly different ways of putting this together. I particularly liked what they've done in Norway and in Ireland, where they've created this kind of resources for the wool industry based on the product. So you will see there in the yellow boxes the different kind of products you can create from wool, and you can then work back to see and understand, right, if I wanted to do a product based on mulch mats, then I can sort of work my way back to see what would the supply chain look like, or what processing would be required. If I'm interested to create a product, a clothing or a garment, well, I can look at the textile sector and look at the supply chain that's required. So if you start from the product end, which I think is a sensible way of starting to build a supply chain, starting from the market end, then you can work your way back using this flowchart as a guide to understand, right, who do I need to be part of my business in order to add value to that fleece? So that flowchart is now available, and we've tried to keep it as simple as possible to give people understanding of the various processing techniques and the various steps to produce different products. Now, also part of the brief was to do work on creating a directory that would help someone who wants to understand who is out there doing what. Now, if you are going to go down the line of building your own supply chain, then one of the challenges is knowing who does what, and that can be quite a difficult and time-consuming piece of work. So what we agreed with the Made with Wool project is that we would make a start. Now, very quickly, we realized we need to broaden out beyond Wales in order to have a selection of different companies. And I've put a part of the directory up there to show you what the directory provides. Now, this is a living and breathing document. And I say that because the environment and what's going on out there is changing all the time. What we've done is a basic research scoping out there to understand who does what. And also what we found is there are people doing different types of processing of wool who might be open to do outsourcing or joint collaboration, but will not be pitching themselves as a white label or a private processor. Now, the directory will flag up companies who have told us they would be open to have a discussion, and we also flag up those companies who are quite clear about their willingness to become a processor or a private contractor. So this directory is available through the Made with Wool project. If you contact the project, they will share a copy of this with you. Now, it has contact details and some very brief details of what the companies do. It includes woolen mills and various manufacturing businesses. Now, if nothing else, this directory will spark some ideas and thoughts about what is possible if you're a farmer or a crafter or someone who just wants to get involved in the wool scene. Now, so this directory is up and running and a living document. And by saying it's living, please come in contact with the project if you're aware of other enterprises and businesses, or if you're aware of a changing situation with these businesses. But the directory, I believe, is a good start to show people what's possible. Now, to move on to the other topics I want to cover, and I've put the grwp goch on the screen there, and you might be wondering where is Geraint going with this presentation. Well, I think I need to recognize from the word go that building a business and a supply chain is a roller coaster. It's a big challenge. And very often when it comes to running a business or a brand or establishing a product, I share or compare it with the journey along grwp goch. And if any of you have navigated grwp goch, you will be well familiar. It's a steep footpath with severe drops in each end, and it is very challenging, and it goes up and down. And that is how it feels when it comes to building a supply chain, in my opinion, from my experience. Now, to do that journey well, you need support, and the Made with Wool project is there to provide support. And we feel moving forward, the wool industry, we hear time and time again, there's probably need to look at the, ways of investing in building supply chains, because developing high value product is definitely one of the way to go forward to add value to wool and fleeces on the farm. And businesses, let's recognize it's difficult. and it's something that we don't cover a lot in projects and business development, is the fact that most businesses will fail, and often feel it's worth looking at that and the reasons why businesses fail. And this slide, prepared by an accountancy firm from the States, sort of flags up the typical issues that businesses fail. They're outcompeted, or they don't have the right team, they run out of cash, they realize there is actually market demand, or they have cash flow problems. And the reason I'm spending a minute or two on this is that being aware of these challenges is required before starting to build a supply chain. And when I come later on in a few minutes to flag up the benefit of outsourcing, in my opinion, outsourcing or building a supply chain is one technique to reduce these kind of risks. So when we're aware of the kind of pitfalls that means that businesses fail, I would like to think that outsourcing is one option to reduce risk, such as not having the right expertise, or such as running out of cash, because outsourcing is a way of developing a product without possibly investing as much as you would need to set up your own processing plant or factory. So, and before I move on to discuss outsourcing in more detail, when it comes to developing a supply chain, there's absolutely nothing wrong in tackling it by developing your own processing plant or adding value yourself. We are not here to say that that approach is wrong, and we're not saying it's right either. It suits some people, it suits some product. I think we were keen with this piece of work, and the project was keen, was to raise awareness that it is possible to build a world supply chain based on the principles of outsourcing and collaborating with different businesses along the supply chain. So as this slide emphasizes, for some people who want to get involved in product development, doing it themselves is an option. However, we're keen to flag up other ways of building a product, and you could argue, well, you could do a bit of both. You could do some primary processing, adding value, such as the grading of wool on the farm, and other pieces of the supply chain through outsourcing. There's so many different ways to skin a cat when it comes to developing and making a product. And here are some of the common challenges when it comes to constructing a supply chain. When it comes to building a supply chain, these is what we hear time and time again are the key challenges. I will not read them out because you will be able to read them out yourself on the screen, and these slides will be available. But I would flag up that some of the challenges that nearly all the time comes up is that people underestimate rather the technicality of processing. Even things that look simple or feel simple to do can be quite technical. If I go back to my food experience, I shared with you earlier that we own the Jones Crisps brand, and you wouldn't believe how technical making crisps is. When I started, I thought, well, we can just slice a few potatoes, fry them, and put them in the bag, and hey ho, we've got a product. Nah, it can be very technical, and it's the same thing applies to wool, because these companies that are in the directories, they're experts, they are specialists in their fields, and outsourcing allows you to benefit from that experience and that expertise. So enough on challenges. Let's move the discussion forward to outsourcing as a way of constructing a supply chain. And what do we mean by outsourcing? Well, very simply, it's contracting out, contracting allan, or if we want to have another definition, it's obtaining product or services from an external or an outside supplier. So that's what we mean by outsourcing. Now, I would suspect that most of you, if you're running a business, you're already doing elements of that. The most common example for a business to outsource is accountancy. Most businesses will have an accountant because we outsource that aspect of the business. But sometimes we may be at fault for not thinking wide enough or open enough to think we can outsource other elements of the business. I've put these two major brands there just to flag up Coca-Cola is a brand. The owners of Coca-Cola, they've got a brand. I don't think they own many factories, if any at all. They outsource the production. So large businesses, multinational businesses use this model. And very often I think if that model works for large businesses who have grown quickly, then it's a model worth looking at. That is how we got involved in that model, was to try and do it on a smaller scale. WhatsApp, you don't need to have a product, you might have a service. If you read into how WhatsApp developed, their growth and success from the founders of WhatsApp is down to outsourcing very quickly in their existence. So outsourcing is a common approach of building a business. And here are reasons why companies do it. And this is from Deloitte, the accountancy firm. There's reducing costs, focusing on core business, frees your time up to concentrate on your own strengths. These are some of the key reasons why, as small businesses, also as startups, we should consider outsourcing. Okay, so I'll leave you for a few seconds to digest that slide. So gradually building up, hopefully, an argument for at least for you to look at outsourcing as a model for you to get involved in a product or to get a product into market. And I'm going to share now over the next slide, as we come to the final quarter of the presentation, a few tips on actually outsourcing. So if you decide that, yes, I need to outsource this step or maybe a number of steps in the supply chain, then these are some of the things I would advocate that you allocate time. Most of them are common sense, but sometimes common sense is not that common and we forget about using them. But and a lot of these comes from my own personal experience and from the experience of others who have been very kind in sharing their experience with us. So when outsourcing, I think to do it successfully, you still need to understand your supply chain. So that means still doing old-fashioned homework and research to understand how your supply chain works, who are the key players, how it's sort of typically structured, in order for you to make better decisions. So linked into that, I think if you're going to get involved in the product, and if you recognize this is going to be a tough challenge, because most businesses, most product is a difficult challenge to get into market and make a profit, then I feel that you need to do your homework. Or if you need to do your homework, you need to be passionate about that product. If you're not passionate, I don't think you will last much than a few weeks, because it's that passion that will drive you on to research and understand, go and visit and talk with people. Second tip is to recognize what you're good at and what maybe are your weaknesses. Now, how you respond to that is a matter of opinion. Personally, I would suggest that if you're aware of a weakness, and that might be a processing element, then that is the element you look to outsource. And then you focus your business activity around your strengths. So if you happen to be particularly good at marketing and branding, well, in my opinion, that is really a good situation, a good scenario where you should consider outsourcing the production for you to focus on those elements of the business. Number three, again, a bit of common sense, is to look at different options when it comes to outsourcing. Not everything will have an option. When doing the work, there's a few things that took my eye. Interiors, there seems to be a number of companies out there who'd be willing to work on a range of soft furnishings and interior products, and also socks. As someone who likes to wear fairly colourful socks, it struck me that there is quite a number of options in the UK of sock manufacturers you can work with to develop your own brand or selection of socks. So have options in order for you to compare, and it's not down to cost, it's down to value for money and who offers what, but it's really worth comparing and contrasting. So number four, built on that, the need to have options. And number five, again, common sense, but something maybe you'd be quite tempted not to do, because to save time and save costs, not to go and see someone. I'm a bit old-fashioned, and I still like to see people I'm going to work with before starting to work. There are some people I work closely with I haven't seen for 18 months, 2 years, but when we started the relationship, it was quite important to get a feel of the business and get an understanding how they work, because how you structure your supply chain might be influenced by the people you work. So I think it's always worth making the effort, even if it's 8 hours drive, to go and see the business just to make sure it's the correct fit, because outsourcing doesn't come without its risks. Although I've just said about 10-15 minutes ago, it allows you to reduce your risk, it still has risks, of course. And one of those is the partner you're going to work with the right fit for your brand, for your business? Number 6 is when it comes to deciding who you're going to work with, not to be tempted to be purely driven by financials. It's more of a value-based decision, because very often the cheapest option is not the cheapest financially. And there's a number of factors you need to consider when deciding who gives and offers the better value. So an example might be company A might be slightly more expensive than company B. However, company A might allow you to do smaller production runs. And for a startup, having that small production run is very valuable at the beginning. So that's just a small example of how you need to consider a number of things before deciding on a partner. When it comes to negotiating, I think that you've got to be ready to push for an arrangement that will suit you as a startup or as a new business. And this is sort of linked to my previous point. You need to have options, because if you've got options, you will negotiate better, because you will negotiate knowing, okay, if things don't go well with this company, I've got a couple of other options. And not to be afraid to go back and ask questions. You might feel you're pushing your luck, but you never know with the response. The worst case scenario is a no. I think it's a bit of a Welsh trait, of a rural trait, not to be a bit too humble, a bit be too soft, and not to ask what we feel might be difficult questions. But these companies, if they are in the game of doing production on behalf of other brands, they will actually value or respect you for exploring different options. So be ready to negotiate and explore different ways of moving forward. Number 8 is to make the most of digital technology, because if you're going to set up a supply chain, you need to have the systems in-house to manage that. And to finish this point very quickly, what I would draw your attention to is this wonderful document called the Digital Essentials, or the software directory available off the Business Wales website. Now, that will flag up a number of software which allow you to do things like managing your customers, managing your financials, managing your stock. And these software would have been far too expensive for the startup many years ago, but because of the cloud revolution, you are able to get access to these software now for a reasonable price of around £20 to £25 per month. And in my opinion, it's not too soon to start with these software from the word go, because they will allow you to scale up and keep tabs of your business. So think about the systems you require to run your supply chain. And lastly, number 9 and number 10, just to manage your own expectation, please accept no one will do the job as good as yourself. If you expect that, then I'm afraid it's likely to lead to friction with the other partners. What you will have to accept is the other partners will do a good quality for your product, but you are a customer and maybe one of many customers. So whereas you would lose sleep for your business, the company you outsource may not necessarily do the same. So be ready to accept that the final product might not be to your exact specification. That doesn't mean it won't be high quality, but it might not be to your exact specification. But realize the whole package, you might not get the 100%, but you might reach 95% of what you're happy. But bear in mind the other things you get from that outsourcing arrangement, all the accreditation, the health and safety covered, the expertise. So I have seen people getting very frustrated because, especially in food, they don't get the exact same taste with an outsourcing company. But I think we've got to be realistic and accept that is going to be the case from the word go. Lastly, if you're going to go down the outsourcing route, realize you really can't, in my opinion, outsource the personality of the business. So the brand, in my opinion, needs to be well managed or ideally managed by yourself when it comes to developing a product. Now we're coming towards the end of my 30-minute slot. So you might ask, okay, that's all well, Geraint, but how do I go ahead to build the supply chain? And to try and answer that quite concisely, I think there's probably a couple of ways that you could start. You could either start proactively or reactively. Personally, I'm a great fan of a reactive approach, and I'll try and explain briefly what I mean with these two terms. And I like this little sketch because I don't mind being the chap in the middle there. Sort of looks very lacy, but it looks lacy, the reactive approach. But I think it's quite a smart way of operating. So what I mean by proactive, I probably mean that your starting point is purely the product. So if you want to develop an outsourcing supply chain reactively, you're probably going to identify a product first. So you're going to look at the market, identify a market gap, and research if there is a demand, or you've concluded there is a demand. So you've got a product in mind, and then you start about researching who's going to do it. So that's quite a proactive way of building a supply chain around a product. The reactive way, in my opinion, is to take a slightly different approach and get an understanding of, right, who does what, and then respond to what's available. That is how we tend to work when it comes to food, is to look and understand who does what and think, right, what options, what opportunities does that give, and try and mold a product that will fit into other people's systems and have a market's demand. Now, the problem maybe with this approach is the emphasis is not 100% on the market gap, and you might be led down the line of trying to mold a product to suit other people. So it's a tricky balance, and there is a pretty good argument to take a bit of both. Is to start with a product idea, have a look to see who does what, and finalize the product based on the abilities of the companies you've identified. So what next? By all means, continue the discussion with the project, with the team, and the Made with Wool project. You've got the core team, of course, of Gwnaed, Ellen, and Angharad. But in my opinion, the Made with Wool team involves all the cluster. There's 300 odd members of the cluster, which the project's been managing and supporting. You've got various contractors who work closely with the project. So having a discussion with the project means having a discussion with a number of different stakeholders. And I would suggest that Ellen and Angharad or Gwnaed is your first point of contact, depending on if you phone or contact or social media, and they might be able to suggest other organisations or businesses for you to have a chat with. Business Wales is there to provide support. Deuparth gwaith I ddechrau is a Welsh saying, dwi'n licio'r adroddiad yma, achos yn aml iawn mi da ni yn amharod I gychwyn, ac mae'n a lot o siarad ond dim lot o weithredu. So this saying is that 2/3 of the work is to start it, to make a start. And hopefully some of you will appreciate this nice landscape I've put behind the saying. And sometimes we've got to just decide, am I going to actually do this or not? And prod ourselves to take action. There is an acronym I like to use when it comes to this, when someone maybe I work with, or even myself, have sort of procrastinated a bit much. I feel that I just need to JDI, which means just do it. Sometimes I add the F and JFDI. I leave you to imagine what the F stands for. And as a business, we have in the past, as a business, been willing to go out and talk with companies and businesses to do a supply chain appraisal, of sitting down, having a feel of the supply chain and identify recommendations. More often than not, this type of work is paid through other projects and other support mechanisms. But I'm just flagging up that we're here as well to offer that kind of support if required. And that starts with a conversation. So here's our contact details. And I think I'm probably 3 minutes over time from a 30 minutes. So I better wrap up, or people will start to call me Alex Ferguson, taking too much extra time. I'm happy to take on questions, comments, and just have a discussion before we finish things up at the latest 5 o'clock. Felly, back over to you, Ellen.
Diolch, Geraint. Thanks, Geraint. I think there has been a couple of questions in the chat. If I just get it up. Let's go. A question on the directory, I think it was. Does the directory follow the structure of the suggested supply chains? That's from Richard Carter.
Yes, to part. You will see the directory, we've got 2 tabs. It's an Excel spreadsheet. The first tab on the spreadsheet highlights mainly the woolen mills across the UK. And we've tried to identify what exactly the mills offers according to the different steps identified in the flowchart. So yes, in that respect. And the second tab is a selection of companies who add values to the yarn or the fleece or whatever stage of the supply chain it is to make the final product. But that doesn't correspond exactly to the flowchart because there's a whole range of different products there. So we couldn't get it to match perfectly. So to an extent, it does.
I think then Gail commented on the outsourcing, I think it was, wasn't it, Gail? Sometimes, however, you can add value by local place-based marketing. Having full traceability, sheep to shop might be important. If you outsource, you could lose that. For example, if you send your fleece to be processed and don't necessarily get your own fleece back.
Yeah, I think you sort of summarised some of the challenges with outsourcing. If we're going to outsource, and provenance is an important part of your story, and in most cases I would suspect it would be, because the projects were all about adding value to Welsh wool, then I would imagine your starting point would be looking at options within your own area or within Wales in order to maintain that provenance and story. However, the options might not be available within that region. So we'd have to look at other parts of the UK, or even further afield. We did limit it to the UK in this instance. And it's a trade-off then, discussion between your own conscience and your brand values. You know, does it actually undermine the brand too much to take it, say, to Scotland to do one step? It depends on your situation. I think in most cases, if provenance is a key part of your story, then at the very least, the wool needs to come from Wales. I think most trade buyers would understand that you might need to take it outside of Wales to be scoured or to be manufactured to whatever product you do. And how you brand it then depends on your approach. Personally, if provenance is a key part, I would be very open with people and explain, listen, our brand is all about Welsh wool. We want to add value. This is how we work. Yes, we work with a supplier in Scotland or Cornwall or Devon, wherever they are, to add value, but we are based in Wales. So I think to be open, and that is maybe some of the sacrifices you have to be ready to be made. I know some people who do that with a viewpoint of testing the markets for the first few years, and if it goes well, they would invest in their own processing plant. So there's so many different ways of doing it, and I think the team and myself in particular will be very keen just to make people aware of the different options, that they don't have to pile the pressure on themselves to think they've got to do everything themselves and to invest all the money. Yeah, so hopefully that's some sort of response to that comment. Yeah. I don't know if Gail, was it Gail that asked the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to take the question from Debbie, but if you want to come back or something, Gail, but by all means, come back.
No, that's okay. Thanks for the discussion.
Yeah. You're welcome. And yeah, your points are very valid. Yeah. Debbie?
Hi there. Yes. That was brilliant, and really, really interested in the directory. I think that's fantastic that you've been able to pull that together. I work for Innovate UK, KTN, where we've been working on over the last year on a circular economy wool initiative. So it's like UK kind of thing, but absolutely love what you're doing. And I guess my question is on the directory, is that really just for your members for Wales, or is that something that I could share a bit more broadly? I just think, yeah, that's the question, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe I should be fair to let Ellen to answer the final question. I think that's the intention is to share it, and I think we've been lucky that to help us to create that directory, there've been some other efforts in other parts of the country. So maybe I would argue maybe not quite as comprehensive as we've done, but I also feel that we've just scratched the surface. I think you could be working full time on the directory for 6 months and still finding some golden nuggets and people ready to do this. And this is why it's important that that we've looked at the directory as a living document, that is not just done and dusted, because we were quite limited in terms of time that we were able to look at things. I am concerned that our accuracy is not what I would like to be. It reminds me of the point I made there now of quality, because the reason I say this is what we've shared there. I don't think there's any sensitive information on what we've shared, but there were occasions where we felt that although we asked people are able to answer these questions, we just felt maybe we weren't talking with the owner, or we're getting the full picture. But I think it's pretty accurate, and we need to keep on adding to it, because I think there's a lot of companies, small specialist companies out there ready to collaborate with people. Ellen, do you want to respond to Debbie in terms of availability? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, Debbie, happy for you to share it. Everything through the project is for everyone to so that they can add value to wool. I think it's just sharing Geraint's not necessarily concerns, but it is live documents, things could change kind of thing, so we're not held accountable to it, if you know what I mean, kind of thing. But yes, happy for you to share it. We've also have a directory on our website. I'll just pop the address actually on the chat. So it's on that. Most of the stuff is on that as well, on our directory. There's just a bit more information on the spreadsheet that you've had on terms of a few more information that Geraint and his team have been able to get from the people in the company. But yes, happy for you to share that. And also, as Gary said, if anyone knows of anyone that wants to be added to the directory, then we can do that, of course.
Well, maybe I should just get a wee chat with you just on wording, because potentially we've got a lot of people in our network like throughout the UK. So it could well be that the way I position it when I push it out is if anybody would like to be added in, if they feel that they have been missed or whatever, and then I can direct that over to you if that helps.
Yes, definitely. That would be great, Debbie.
Thank you.
Yeah. And even if the director just sparks off ideas and conversations, I think that can only mean that there's more use of wool, and if there's more use of the local and Welsh or other parts of the UK, then that should add more value to the fleece. Yeah.
Great.
I can see some more faces now. Yeah. So if you want to switch your cameras on there, feel free to switch your camera. You might want me to switch mine off, but I'm afraid I'll have to stay on. Yes, gwestiynau eraill?
Yes, any more questions
or comments? Or
if you want to put them in the chat, if you feel more comfortable doing that, that's fine.
Oh yeah, Lynn's got to share some more. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Lynn, for sharing the flow chart on the European Wool Association.
Oh, Angela.
Hi. Unfortunately, I missed quite a lot of your your talk, but I have actually printed out the document that was sent to me, so I have read it through. But it was just unfortunate my computer just wouldn't let me hear you, so I could see what you were doing, but I couldn't hear you. So now I'm on my iPad, which took me ages to sort out, but I think I got the end of it anyway. And just to say, really, that having sort of started a business using wool, several years ago, what I caught about where you were talking about outsourcing, that was really interesting, because having gone through that process, some of the comments that you made about making sure that you get the right partner, but one of the things that I went home and just to say is, yes, you do lose sleep over it, but the person that you're partnering with, as an outsourcer, won't. And I think that was a really good comment to make, because I've had that where I'm losing sleep and the guy's quite happy saying, sorry, I can't do that for you at that time. And I've got an order to go out and they're saying, sorry, I've got a day off or whatever. So you're absolutely, just all those comments about outsourcing, I thought, yeah, absolutely, I've been there. And really, I think it is just to reiterate what you said. You are the best person to sort of run and control what you're trying to do, especially if it's an innovation, because I think when it's an innovation, it's only you that really understands what you're aiming for, what your final product needs to be like. And I've had lots of meetings with various people, and I think offering yourself offering to go with people, I think is great, because at the beginning I didn't have that, and I went through about, I don't know, 3 or 4 felters, and God knows how many sort of packaging people, like sort of bagging people, or people that could actually do the putting the product together. I just must have gone to half a dozen, and they'd have a go and then they didn't really want to do it. And so really, just to give a little bit of my experience, and if you ever want to talk to me about how I've got to where I have with Woolcore, please, is it Geraint? Is that right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes,
Yeah,
Geraint,
right.
yeah.
Just if you want to contact me at any time, just please do, and I can give you a little bit of information on my journey if it helps.
Excellent, and I think I'm lucky to be coming over to see you in a few weeks' time, Angela.
Oh, well,
Yes.
are you? Oh, great.
Yes, yeah,
Ah,
Geraint was going to come with
with
us. Yes, we haven't set the date yet, have we, Angela? But we'll talk next week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but great, Count. That's
Yeah,
super. Oh, and I'm sure that Joe and Jessica, who are my daughters who are running the business basically on a day-to-day, they'd be really, really pleased to meet you all. That's great. I'd forgotten about, didn't know that Geraint was coming. Yeah, great. Okay.
Yeah, it's in my it's marked in capitals in my diary, Angela.
Oh, fantastic. So when we've got a date, we'll sort that.
Really
I think it's just
that,
getting you all together at the right time, isn't it? That's the problem.
Yes.
Yes. Well, we'll sort it, and we'll get some sandwiches in as well. Okay. You'll be fed. Right.
Well.
Okay.
Well,
I just wanted to. It just
really
really went home to me when you were saying that, so I had to make a comment. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks.
Now the Made with Wool project knows my emphasis on food. So looking forward to that.
There you go. Okay. Right.
So I'm now conscious that you would join later on, Angela, and just for everybody else, Angela's the founder of Wool Cool, yes, so I'd be lucky to be over to meet you later on, Angela. So thanks for those comments. Any other questions there?
No. Please feel free to email us. I'll just pop our email there as well. So if you've got any questions or anything else, please just give us an email. So yeah, I think that's everything. Like Geraint said, we'll share the report as well. Obviously, we've shared the reports. I mean, the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation. We'll share that with everyone as well.
Yeah, and it's not raining here at last. So how it is with everybody. We've had it feels like we've had inches today.
Yeah.
So I guess if we were in a physical room somewhere, we would probably be last to leave, Ellen. So we'll let people just drift off then this session then, yeah?
Yes,
And then if
thank you
there's
all
any
for
sort of
joining us.
comments on the way out, just flag it up. Yeah, and good to thank you for being part of it. Yeah, it's great to have those comments.
Yes, and we've got an event on the 8th of June, guys, in person. So just keep an eye on our socials for the location. Bye, thank
Ta-ra,
you. Diolch.
ta-ra. Diolch.